My name is Cynthia Garner, and I am a mindfulness coach and author, trauma-sensitive educator, and I'm delighted to be here today with you all to share some practices and some guidance around working with anger and grief, especially in the landscape of these very challenging times when there are many forces that are seeking to divide us. And the hope today is that we will be able to just reconnect with ourselves in a gentle and kind way, make some space for some big emotions, and just do some embodied practice of working skillfully with big emotions as they arise. I would love to invite you, if you're here, to participate by putting some thoughts into the chat from time to time. And this really helps me to be responsive to what's here. So I'd invite you to go ahead and start, if you're willing, by just throwing into the chat just briefly, what made you sign up for this session today? Why are you here? And thanks, Annie. It's great to see you. If there's anything specific in your awareness or in your life that you're working with that you'd like to maybe see addressed in this session, I would love to bring it into the chat and make some space for it. Family relationships can be very, very triggering, and it can be very challenging to work skillfully with those. Yeah, thank you, Annie, for sharing. Yeah, anger doesn't feel very good in our bodies, and it makes sense that we want to be less angry. Yeah, menopausal rage. Oh, it sure is a thing. I definitely hear that, Catherine. And very difficult to manage for sure. Divorce, yeah. Thanks, Donna. I also, about 8 years ago, went through a very nasty divorce, and it brings up a lot of big feelings. Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, that grief and anger kind of overlapping with each other, with the death of a parent, and then the relationship between the surviving parent. Yeah, it does tend to come out of nowhere, can be quite explosive. Okay. Yeah, Sonia, thank you. Says she has an issue with a landlord doing dishonest practices and going to court trying to defend myself. Wow. Yeah, having to be in a position of defending yourself in a landscape when you are holding tight to what you know is right, that can bring a lot of anger into your system. And a lot of times the court system can kind of block us at every turn. So that anger has nowhere to go. And a lot of times it gets shut down, much in the same way that when we're young, our big feelings, our anger, our rage, our grief are somewhat pathologized. We're made to feel like it's not okay to have those big feelings, and that in order to be a part of the rest of the family or the rest of the group, we have to kind of go off and manage those emotions on our own and figure it out and make them go away in order to come back and be welcomed. So that can be really, really challenging. Yeah, wow, so some shared experiences here. Kind of, it looks like a sort of general theme of pushing against corrupt power structures and a feeling of powerlessness, which is definitely a source of very justified rage. Yeah, CPTSD. Okay, yeah, thanks, Shonda, for sharing. Working with autism and addiction and bipolar disorder. Yeah, these kind of big surges of experience that can blindside us or seem out of our control. We'll definitely try to make some space for working with some of that. Yeah, so Sonia again says, witnessing the elders in the building being bullied. And we're seeing this playing out on a really kind of global scale in many ways right now. We have very vulnerable populations being bullied at a very public level and with actually policies being implemented that strip them of their humanity. And this is a trauma, and I want to acknowledge that. And any time that we're being forced to confine or restrict our rage and our anger and these justified emotions that are coming up in us, that can be akin to like a confinement trauma or a violation of our right to have the feeling that we're having. And if any of you have ever been in a relationship with someone who has narcissistic behaviors or in that place of that kind of ongoing power struggle where your emotions are continuously invalidated, or your experience of being a human being in your body is invalidated or violated, this is a very, very justifiable reason for having this big feeling of stored anger or rage. Yeah, great. Okay, Sonia, thank you. Yeah, we're going to make some space for that today if we can, and I'll offer some guidance in a mindfulness practice that we'll do together here in a few minutes that will hopefully help us kind of work skillfully and make a little bit more space for those big feelings so that they're not so explosive and overpowering and overwhelming when they arise. Yeah, no problem. All right, so welcome to those of you who are just joining us. We have just been throwing a couple of things into the chat that are alive for us in the landscape of anger, rage, grief, and offering some of ourselves into this collected space so that we can be present for what's here. Okay, so the first thing I am going to invite us to do, this is just a brief little somatic exercise, kind of a thought experiment. So this is a little practice that I learned from a man named David Trelevin, who has a book out called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness. And he, I guess, learned it from Stacey Haynes, who has worked extensively with survivors of relational and sexual violence. This is, you can do this seated or standing, it doesn't really matter what posture or position you're in. What we're going to do is we're just going to make a fist. And you can let this fist be a relatively angry fist. And imagining that the job of this fist is to stay closed. That is its job. And now with the other hand, this is just an experiment again, we're going to come and try to pry open this fist. Remembering that the job of this fist is to stay closed. And as you do this, just kind of notice what happens in your body. Trying to pry open this fist that is really determined to stay closed. Okay, and you don't need to do that for too long because it may not feel great, and you can let that go and just kind of shake out the hands. And we're going to do it again, this time maybe with the other hand, just to shake it up a little bit. And so once again, making a fist. And still, the job of this fist is to stay closed. And it can also be a very angry fist, clenched fist, and noticing what that's like to hold your hand in a fist. Feel that. And now, with the opposing hand, instead of trying to pry the fist open this time, we're going to bring our other hand underneath and just gently cradle the fist. And you might even imagine that the cradling hand is helping the fist stay closed. Just noticing what happens as you bring some support and some care to this closed fist. Okay, and you can release that when you're ready, shaking it out. And Yeah. So thanks, Sonia. Notices the fist wanting to open. Go ahead and throw any observations into the chat there. What did you notice in that exercise? And Sonia's experience of wanting the fist to open. Sonia, was that when your hand was cradling? Yeah, on the second try. Yeah. And as you're putting your experiences into the chat there, I will reflect Sonia's experiences. This is a very common reflection when we do this exercise. And it is interesting to kind of consider, calmer the second time, Rosie says, to consider like what this somatic, this kind of physical experiment has to offer us about how we relate to our anger and our rage and any emotion or experience that we're having, really. So when we are trying to pry the fist open, when we're pulling on those fingers and working against what wants to happen, which is this fist's job to stay closed, what we're doing here is we're saying it's not okay to be a closed fist. You need to go away. You need to be different. You need to change. I need to fix this fist. And it doesn't feel very good. And many of you probably noticed that holding that fist tightly and trying to pry it open maybe even invoked a sense of anxiety or increased the discomfort in your body. The second time we do this experiment is a whole different experience. We've got this fist that's job is to stay closed. It might be an angry fist. And what we're doing, instead of saying this fist, Sonia's getting more upset the first time. What we're doing, instead of saying that this anger is a problem, what we're doing is we're holding it. And we're even helping the fist to stay closed, so we're supporting that emotion, that feeling. And this is what we can do. This is what we do in psychotherapy. This is what we can do in a mindfulness practice with self-compassion and some care, is we can create some space for ourselves to welcome the experience that we are having, even if it is a big experience that's very uncomfortable or unpleasant, or that other people don't like when we have it. And many of our emotions, these big ones, have been very much exiled since we were very, very young and told, for me, it was, go to your room and come out when you're ready. And ready meant that I wasn't having a big feeling anymore. So I had to go off by myself and deal with these big emotions, these big upheavals and upsets by myself. And the message that my nervous system got in that consequence, basically, for my behavior was that feelings such as sadness and anger and rage were not okay to have, that they were a problem, and that I was a problem if I was experiencing them. This can kind of compound that core wound, especially when you're in an environment where there is ongoing violation of your right to belong in your body, in your heart, in your mind. And so when we welcome ourselves to have the experience that we're having, even if it's unpleasant, this makes just a little bit of space and can even touch that wounded part that learned that what they were experiencing was not okay. So, negativity bias is a term that is used in teaching mindfulness-based interventions, especially mindfulness-based stress reduction, and it's a really important concept to understand. Negativity bias basically refers to our automatic attentional pull towards the threat or the problem in our environment, the threat to our safety or belonging. And so when we were evolving in the early days of humans on the savannah, this negativity bias would help us survive by detecting any small threat, maybe a snake in the bushes or a little rustle in the grass that might be a saber-toothed tiger, or some kind of general threat where our attention is like really quickly and automatically pulled. There's all of these signals in our gut, in our back of our neck. Our heart starts racing. We start to prepare to mobilize so that we can defend ourselves or run away from an attack. And in our modern era, this negativity bias has basically started to run on like overdrive, because there are so many perceived threats to our belonging and our safety in our environment, especially when we're taking in that kind of constant news cycle, when we are living in a family system where parts of us are being alienated or exiled. If you, like Chandra, are a non-binary queer person living in America, right now there is threat everywhere. And Chandra, I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for being here with us today. And I just want to welcome everyone again who's just joining us. And so this negativity bias, it really kept us safe at a time, but now it's kind of on overdrive. And so we are getting kind of chronically hijacked into this habit loop of fear and of exile and of non-belonging. And this can really wreak havoc on our nervous system. It shows up as chronic tension in our body, reactivity, overwhelm, exhaustion, depletion, burnout, rage, all of these ways that this experience that we're being forced to contain and hold is, has nowhere to go. So what we need to do is we need to start noticing that tendency to perceive a threat. And this is happening all over the place. It's just like threat, 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 threat. And what we can do actually is we can create a sense of safety within our nervous system, within our own selves, by grounding attention within our own body in the present moment with what's actually here right in front of us. A lot of times these perceived threats that are coming into us all the time are actually not happening in real time in the present moment. And if they are, that negativity bias is really important because it's giving us information that we need to respond to. Those feelings, those intense upsurges of rage or anger, or that overwhelming feeling of things wanting to pour or explode out of you. This is your system giving you information that something needs to change. And it's really important that we have ways to work skillfully with this information so that we can, in a regulated and responsive way, use that information to skillfully guide our experience towards safety and to make changes in our environment and in the environments of our loved ones so that we're supporting that safety. Okay, so we're 20 minutes in, 72 of you here. Again, welcome. People are still joining us. We've been talking a little bit about the role of anger and rage and these big upsurges of emotion in our bodies, and how to welcome those experiences in a way that is safe and manageable and gives us permission to be who we are, to have the experience that we're having, to be a human being with big feelings and emotions. And this is so, so important. So we're going to start to practice here together. We'll do about a 20-25 minute guided meditation, and then we'll have some time again at the end for reflection and questions and some processing of what we do in this practice. So before we sit, I want to honor, thanks for your gratitude, thanks for being here, thanks for showing up. If you've been here with me before for one of these sessions in the past few weeks, this practice may feel similar, which is fine, because repetition is the key to learning, and that's how our nervous system starts to really become ingrained with this felt sense of belonging and safety in the body, and welcoming any feelings that we have so that we can get some information and create some space around them and work skillfully. Okay, so First thing I want to offer you as we prepare to practice together is please stay in choice. Taking agency over your experience is a trauma intervention. And so choosing your posture, choosing how you'd like to sit, where you'd like to put your feet, what kind of surface you'd like to be on is just totally up to you. And I invite you, as we get settled, to invite some gentle movement into the body. Because in addition to taking agency over your own experience, movement is another trauma intervention. And a lot of times, these big feelings of anger and rage, one of the reasons they overpower us is because they have been trapped or stuck inside us. So whatever your body kind of wants to do to open, stretch, bring a little movement into the body, some twists, maybe crossing the midline of the body. And once you come into kind of a settled, seated posture, just starting to root down through the points of contact where your body connects with either the floor or the chair or the cushion that you're sitting on. We're going to do just a couple of rounds of breath with some movement. For me, that's going to look like raising and lowering my arms as I breathe in and out. For you, it may look any kind of way. You do whatever you need to do. Welcome to follow along with me as we breathe in, raising the arms up. Breathing out, lowering the arms. Synchronizing the breath with the rhythm of the movement that you've chosen. You may even decide to have a more audible exhale as you release the arms, letting go of anything that's no longer useful. Maybe one more round of breath. And sighing, releasing as you drop the arms, shaking out the shoulders, and starting to settle the body. And as we begin to turn the attention inward, you're welcome to close the eyes if that feels comfortable for you. You can also just gently rest the gaze on the middle distance in front of you or a few feet in front of you on the floor. It may be supportive to choose an object that's in front of you, perhaps something on your table or outside the window, as an external anchor that you can return to if you need to at any point during this practice. And I will probably move back and forth between internal and external anchors, opening and closing my eyes as a kind of way of taking agency over my experience. You're welcome to do the same thing. I also like to practice when I have my eyes closed, especially, I bring a little bit of a gentle sway into my body. You're welcome to do this if it supports you. Might be a sway forwards and back, or side to side. And with each breath, just turning the attention more inwards towards the body sitting and welcoming yourself. And choosing an anchor for your attention. This may be the sensations of gravity in the body, perhaps noticing the pressure where the feet rest against the floor, where the buttocks rest against the chair. Or you might choose to anchor attention with the sensations of the breath. The breath is a supportive anchor for you. You're choosing one place where you most notice the sensations of breathing and attending here. This might be the ribs moving in and out, the sensations of air hitting the back of the throat. You may even choose to place a hand on a part of the body that could use some care or some support, and letting this be an anchor for attention. I personally find that placing a hand on my heart gives me a sense of being held. And resting attention with the sensations of the body breathing, the body sitting. And if attention's pulled into thinking or planning or sounds, knowing that this is completely normal, without any judgment, just gently guiding attention back. The sensations of the breath and the body, welcoming yourself home. All of you is welcome here. You belong right here. And setting an intention for this practice. Thank you for carving out the space and time to be with yourself, to welcome all of your parts. Now expanding awareness to include a sense of the entire body sitting and breathing. wrapping yourself in loving awareness. Of taking this perspective of the witness, holding in your mind's eye this image of yourself sitting here in this tender, open, receptive presence. If at any time it's necessary to stabilize attention by returning awareness to an anchor or opening the eyes, please feel free to go ahead and care for yourself, always staying in choice. And in a few moments, I'm going to invite you to bring to mind an experience or a situation that brings this emotional quality of anger, even rage, or profound grief. In many ways, they're all kind of the same thing. And as we choose this experience, the request I would make of you is please choose something that feels manageable. You don't want to be overwhelmed. Really needing to stay in the driver's seat in this experience. So if this is your first time doing a practice like this, really making the effort to start with something small. Many of us as trauma survivors have a kind of automatic tendency to over-attend to traumatic stimuli and to try to get to the bottom of why we feel the way we feel. And for the duration of this practice, I invite you to let go of that as best you can. There's no need to figure anything out, solve your life. Simply making some space for what's here and welcoming what arises as best you can. Knowing that we can always return to that anchor whenever you need to. Your job is to be the cradling hand in this exercise, to bear witness to the experience you're having without making it go away. And so starting to notice from this witness perspective, as you bring this situation to mind, what happens in the body as you start to explore and investigate this scenario or conversation or relationship that invokes these big feelings. And as these sensations arise in the body and you bring attention to them, it may be supportive to bring a hand to the place in the body where you're feeling these sensations. Just this gentle gesture of care, holding yourself. Again, not with the intention of making this go away, but welcoming what's here. How do you notice anger? How do you notice grief? Using a noting practice here to identify the sensations. You might notice pressure, heaviness, churning, tightening, clenching or bracing. Whatever's here, allowing and welcoming as best you can. Noticing any story or narrative that comes up as you attend to these sensations in the body. And then gently returning to simply experiencing the felt sense. Right as it is now, just here in the present moment. What's happening for you in your body? You can think of this as kind of watching the trains come and go from the subway platform. Allowing an experience to arise. Watching the passengers come and go. And then watching it pass away. You can use the breath to make a little bit more space around these big emotions. Breathing into these areas of intense sensation. Making just a little bit more space. All your humanness is welcome here. This feeling belongs. If you are someone who has kind of a visual way of working with core experience, I invite you to bring into your awareness the image of yourself as a child. Perhaps during a time in your life when you were also experiencing this feeling that you're having now. And with the breath, with your kind, loving awareness, wrapping your care and your love around this child and welcoming them to belong. And maybe another image that comes, maybe an animal or a being. And that's fine too. It might be just a texture or a color or a shape. Welcoming all. feelings. I'm going to start to just bring this gentle, open question to this experience. How can I best tend to what's here? What does this experience want or need? Perhaps there's something that anger or grief wants to say or needs to hear. Or something that needs to be changed or set right. Letting this be information. Bringing this gentle care and receptivity and inquiry to these feelings. How can I best support this, given what's arising? And on an exhale, gently releasing this situation, this experience from your attention, and bringing the full focus of awareness back to the space around the heart. And if you haven't done it already, I invite you to place a hand or both hands on the heart or another part of the body that feels as though it could use some support. Noticing the sensations of pressure, maybe the temperature of the hand. You might even notice the layer of clothing between the hand and the heart. Perhaps there's even a gentle massaging of the heart space. Our hearts are a super powerful tool that not only powers our own body and keeps us breathing and keeps our blood flowing, keeps us alive, there's also this radiant electromagnetic field that extends beyond our bodies. Our hearts are actually sense organs designed to give and receive information to others in our environment. So I invite you to kind of picture this energetic flow of information coming and going from the heart, expanding this awareness all the way out to the length, the breadth of this magnetic field of the heart, which actually extends at least 3 feet beyond your body and more when you're experiencing a powerful emotion. And just seeing if you can kind of sense this movement of energy and electricity all around the body. Letting this be kind of a bubble of protection, care. heart also has this capacity to turn poison into medicine, to convert grief into love, to convert anger into wise action. As you open the channels to move your energy throughout your entire electromagnetic field and through your body, I invite you to just allow yourself to carry that experience that you brought to mind earlier along those pathways, circulating it through your blood, through your electrical field, through the heart space. With each pulsing of the heart, infusing that experience of emotion with love and care. For this wounded part of yourself that isn't getting your needs met, that needs to be seen, that needs to be heard. Perhaps even seeing if you can get in touch with the beauty of this need. The beauty underneath the grief. Beauty, that connection with each other is what drives us. That our baseline resting state is safety and belonging with each other and with ourselves. And in the final moments of this practice, as you continue to hold yourself in this kind, loving awareness, I invite you to offer yourself some words from this place of loving care. What is it that this wounded part needs to hear? We'll close with a few loving kindness phrases directed towards ourselves. You're welcome to use your own or to silently or out loud repeat after me. May I be safe and protected. May I be welcome in my body, in my heart, and in my mind. May I be free from enmity. May no hatred fill my heart. May I be peaceful. May I be kind to myself and to all beings. And taking all the time you need to complete this practice, inviting some gentle movement back into the body. The eyes blink open if they've been closed. Stretching. Right. Brush some of that Wei Qi, that old energy off the body. I like to kind of sweep down the body. And then taking any of that energy that's in your hands now and placing your hands on a flat surface, maybe the floor, the table in front of you, or the wall. And just releasing anything that you don't need to carry anymore. Knowing that the earth can hold, is already holding everything that you're carrying. Clearing the pathways so that you can be a conduit for the work that is happening through you. Okay, thank you so much for your practice. I'm really grateful to be able to share this space. 136 of you now, welcome. And I would be more than happy to spend a few moments responding to anything that you want to throw in the chat about what you noticed. Thank you for your gratitude. When you show up to practice with me and you push that heart button, it fills my well and energizes me and keeps me going so that I can keep offering this work to others. If you have the capacity to make a donation today, I put that money towards my work with survivors of relational violence and survivors of narcissistic abuse. And I would be more than grateful to receive your gratitude, your support. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear from y'all in the chat, and I'm also happy to stay on a little bit past 9 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, which is in just a few minutes. If something showed up in that practice that was challenging for you and you're wondering how you might work with it a little differently or more skillfully, I'd love to chat about that. If something really landed for you, I'd love to hear that. The most important thing we can do when we are working with overpowering emotions is keep ourselves really rooted and grounded in the present moment so that we are in the driver's seat of our actions. When we're operating from a place of reactivity or fight flight or explosiveness, a lot of times, Sonia, thank you. A lot of times our prefrontal cortex is not even online, and all of these parts of our brain that are really in charge of skillful decision making and executive functioning and logic and reasoning, they're not available to us when we're in this hijacked state of fight flight. And so we're actually not helping the situation. When we're raging, when we're exploding, when we're fiery, and this can be actually very triggering for others who may have experiences with violence in their past, or raging parents, raging romantic partners. This can be very, very scary. So if we're going to be agents of change, doing good work in the world, we can't be terrifying people. We can't be losing ourselves. It also feels awful, as a couple of you named at the beginning of the call. Yeah, so it feels like I use anger and rage to help me move out of catatonic fear freeze. So it does get messy. Yeah. So what you're talking about, Nani, thank you, is this kind of swing back and forth between those states of fight and flight and the freeze state. And these are two states that are actually outside of our window of tolerance. If you're familiar with the model of the window of tolerance from psychotherapy, it's a really helpful kind of framework for understanding how your nervous system works, especially in the aftermath of trauma. So the window of tolerance is a model within which we can kind of understand our hyper arousal, which is where we kind of pop up out of it, which is when we go into that fight flight, and our hypo arousal, which is where we go down into that freeze, kind of defeat collapse state. Our window of tolerance can be widened, or it can become very, very small. When we have a wide window of tolerance, what we have the capacity to do is ride these waves of emotional experience without popping out into that fight-flight state or popping down into that freeze-collapse state. But we're kind of, regulated around a baseline, moving back and forth. Sure, I'm a little bit activated, but I'm actually in control. I'm in the driver's seat. In order to widen the window of tolerance, what we need to do is practices like the one we just did, where we're practicing repeatedly over time, building our tolerance, building our ability to actually be with that amount of discomfort that's at the edge without losing ourselves, without skyrocketing into fight flight. This especially was really hard for me when I first started meditating, because what I was having happen was I would sit down on the cushion and I would close my eyes, and at first I would kind of settle, but then very, very quickly what would happen is I would start to just panic. I would feel like I had to run, just get off the cushion. Like my nervous system was doing this thing where my heart would start beating really fast, my breathing I would start sweating, and it was this kind of trapped feeling. And my trauma history has something to do with confinement and being trapped, actually being stuck in a situation where I was witnessing violence. And so learning over time with the help of a skilled therapist to actually kind of start to notice the edges of that experience of panic as it started to rise, and slowing down a little bit and making a little space for me to have that experience without it being a problem that was scary in the present moment, and kind of building my capacity to tolerate that intensity of physical sensation allowed me over time to widen my window of tolerance. But I had to do it with a lot of other tools. And I kind of worked this into the practice a little bit. This returning to a place of baseline regulation. So having some anchors, actually like a huge menu list of anchors that you can go to stabilize your attention. Because what's happening when you get hijacked and triggered and pushed into that place of reactivity, what's happening there is that you are actually getting hijacked out of your control of your attention. This situation that happened in the past, or the threat of the situation, is taking the wheel. And it is driving your amygdala and making you believe that in the present moment you're actually in danger. So the skill that we can use to mitigate this, and this is a crisis intervention, is those 5 senses. Regulating, grounding attention in the present moment, using your eyes, looking around the room, using the sense of smell, maybe it's essential oils, taste, sound, sensations in the body, what's actually here right now. And this can really, really help us not have that like fly off the handle, but actually have a place to stabilize attention. And what happens in our nervous system very, very quickly when we do that is our amygdala, this threat response detector, quickly gets the message that, oh, actually right now in the present moment, there is no threat, no immediate threat to my safety or my belonging. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna just take a pause here and read some of these comments in the chat so I can respond to them. Again, I'm really grateful to all of you who are here. We're past the scheduled time, so we won't have more people joining us, and I know some of you just joined here in these last few minutes. So I will be posting a recording of this session, and you can find the link to my website in the bio. Please like my profile, follow my profile on Insight Timer. I have a session scheduled for tomorrow. Slightly different theme. Let me check and see here real quick what I'm offering. Tomorrow's event, grounding into compassionate presence in a world on fire. So yeah, it'll be similar. But tomorrow morning at 8:30, I'll be here guiding that practice. Okay, so anger and rage. Nani, I want to go back to your comment here, and just your use of the word help. There is so much information in anger and rage, and I just want to reiterate again and again, and I don't think I can say this enough, that these are not emotions that we need to make go away or that are problems. It's actually like a huge amount of information about what needs to change and our role in making that change happen. If you're here right now and if you are paying any attention to what's happening in the world, there is massive systemic injustice unfolding at a really kind of unprecedented and very heartbreaking rate. And we can't ignore this. The way that our nervous systems communicate with each other, we're going to feel this tension in the field. It is not in alignment with our humanity to exile and to discriminate against other human beings. And so even if we personally are not in an experience where we're being oppressed or bullied, this information is in the collective field, and it is moving through our systems, and we need to respond to it. What we can't do is pick up pitchforks and go charging around violently, because that's not going to solve anything. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. so beautifully said, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And so this feeling in our body that's so overpowering is trying to get our attention, because what we need to do is we need to practice radical love and radical acceptance. We need to welcome these feelings and welcome this information so that we can do what needs to be done to guide our entire human society towards collective healing. I'm going to go to the next level even and say that the planet itself is speaking through us. And this rage and this anxiety and this anger and this grief of loss that we're feeling on a deep soul level is this information that is coming from the earth itself. We're not just looking at systemic injustice and imbalance. What we're looking at is actually a planetary imbalance. The climate crisis is real, and we do need to respond to that. We need to pay attention to what the earth is telling us. And as human beings, we are not separate from the earth. In fact, there's the image of the earth from space. If we think about what the earth looks like, we don't have just a ball with a bunch of humans running around on top of it. We're actually tucked in to this layer of atmosphere, and we're held within the earth. We are part of the earth. And so the information that is passing through the collective kind of energetic field is, it's powerful, and it's designed to get our attention. And we do need to respond to it. My invitation to you all is to respond with love as best you can. And in order to do that, we have to really cultivate that capacity within ourselves to respond with love and care to what's arising in us. Yeah. So, how do you let go of rage for a man who only married you to take your innocence and then leave you by cheating and abusing? Yeah. There's so much there, and rage. Letting go is an interesting phrase, and I actually don't like it very much because I think it puts a lot of pressure on us, and it actually kind of implies that we should be able to let it go, that we should be able to just let it go and just focus on the good stuff. And that to me is a load of crap, to be honest. I like to use the phrase instead, letting be. And this kind of allows us to welcome it. And so rage is here. It is real. It is powerful. It has energy and fire in my body. How can I let it be here without becoming overwhelmed by it? First, I can take some space and investigate and get curious. What is here? And what does it need? I think a lot of times rage needs some movement. It needs to scream. It needs to cry. It needs to break things. It needs to destroy something. It needs revenge. All of these things. And so how can we do that without causing harm? And this is where just that little bit of space and discernment is really, really helpful. Some practices that I have used that have really supported me are if there's a creek or a stream or maybe an open space near your house where you might be able to pick up some rocks or some tree branches or just some object in nature and throw and scream and smash. This can be very cathartic, and it can really help get that energy moving, because if it's stuck and it's contained and it's trapped, it's like a volcano without a steam vent. And especially with all that's happening in the world, that is just going to build and build and build and build and ultimately explode and cause harm. What we need to do is give ourselves these steam vents and tend to the body. So movement is really important in the landscape of anger and rage, because we can't just store it and stuff it and keep it stuck in our system. Intense physical exercise, gentle yoga, any kind of embodied kind of intentional experience where you get to externalize these emotions, getting them out of your body, smashing, banging, screaming into a pillow, dancing, going out and just having a good old-fashioned romp on the town, maybe without the alcohol, and just letting yourself moving. The other thing that can help is to do some rhythmic sensory input. So, this part of our brainstem that's actually at the back of our neck is a really interesting part of our brainstem when you start to understand how it works. There's all kinds of ways we can work skillfully with this response. If you've ever had that prickle of fear on the back of your neck, or that that feel, or maybe you get headaches there or something. This part of our brainstem is actually the first part of our brain to develop when we're in the womb. And it is responsible for our breathing, our heartbeat, everything that basically happens rhythmically in the body. And when we are in the womb and our mother has experiences that create fear or anxiety or stress for her, what we experience in the womb is the activation, the same activation. We get pumped full of stress hormones. We experience her heart rate speeding up and slowing down, and it's not predictable. And a lot of times in environments where a pregnant mother is not safe or highly stressed, what we have is we have this kind of like intermittent arousal. We never know when it's coming. It's unpredictable. And all of a sudden, boom, stress. All of a sudden, boom. So this basically teaches our nervous system from the time that we are a fetus. It teaches our nervous system that the world is intermittently unsafe. And it primes us for high levels of reactivity. And it makes our window of tolerance relatively small. The opposite is when we have a mother who has a very calm, peaceful pregnancy and is never, hooked into that fight-flight activation. And the input that we get when our brainstem is developing is very rhythmic, steady. There's no upheaval. We just have a steady heartbeat, predictable experience, and many trauma survivors, that this just isn't their reality. So we can actually retrain our nervous system and retrain the brain stem and those systems in our body with rhythmic sensory input, because we're actually recreating in our nervous system the experience that we didn't get to have when we were developing and figuring out how the world works at a core level. Any kind of listening to music or drumming, movement, again, rhythmic movement. What was that training? Lisa, this is a good question. I've done so many trainings. Let me think for a second about where and how I learned this. I know. It was equine assisted therapy. So rhythmic sensory input when you work with horses is one of the biggest benefits. You're hearing that steady hoof beat, the beating of the horse's heart. You're being carried in that rhythmic way. So if you think about what it's like to be in the womb when a mother is walking, that rhythmic back and forth is very soothing, which is why a lot of moms with babies will sway to calm them down. So if we can give ourselves that rhythmic sensory input, Lisa, I would recommend to you, there's a couple of books that I would recommend. One is called Brainstorm, and it's by Dan Siegel. I'll put that into the chat here. And it was written for teens specifically, but it's actually a really kind of wonderful book. Gives you some insight about how the teenage brain works, but also just in general. Dan Siegel is a neuroscientist who has done a lot of really good work with mindfulness and meditation and psychotherapy, but understanding that I think I really got a lot of that from his work. Okay. Yeah, great. So can you show us some yoga and breath work we can use when we are spazzing out and overwhelmed? Yeah, Chandra, no problem. I will probably complete with that because we are over time and I do have another appointment here in just a couple minutes. Yoga, okay. So anything that crosses the midline of the body is going to help your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs from the bottom of that brainstem through all of your organs. And it's responsible for your gut feeling, that ache in your heart, your breath. This is kind of your core regulating nerve. And so toning the vagus nerve is going to be a really helpful thing to do in those moments of activation. So you can do this by humming, singing. Yeah, thanks, Sonia, for coming. Again, like those twists, any kind of gentle movement, anything that's synchronized with the breath, which is why we did those breathing in and out. Arms up as you breathe in, comes down as you breathe out. So feel free to play with those. And actually, you've kind of given me the idea. I think maybe I'll do a whole session on just yoga and breathing as crisis intervention. But belly breaths, placing a hand on your belly and forcing it, like making it go out as you breathe in, inflating that balloon. That can really help. Grounding attention in the present moment. So using those senses, and the breath, noticing the tendency to go into thoughts about the terrifying things that might happen or could happen, and returning attention, cultivating that attentional control outside of those moments of reactivity and crisis, so that when the trigger happens, you actually have more places to place your attention, more home bases to rest on. Yes, I will indeed. I do have to go. Thank you again. Your donations do support survivors of relational violence and narcissistic abuse, and they do kind of motivate me to keep going. I love teaching here on Insight Timer. Please follow me. Check out my recorded meditations. Maybe I'll see some of you tomorrow at 8:30. And thank you so much for being here. Blessings. I'm with you. I see you. Thank you for being who you are. And all of you is welcome here. Thank you.